Chapter 5 is so close, it's almost here. I'm writing the first line of this script 30 minutes after the release date announcement on the 9th, June 24th. I thought I'd have at least until, the second half of 2026 to make this video, but I guess not, Toby. My previous videos have been very methodical, detail-oriented, some might call them a bit tedious. This video is going to be the opposite of that. I want to put my final predictions out there so that when Chapter 5 drops, you can cook me for being wrong. In some ways, this is the video that combines all of my previous theories into one. We'll see if we can make everything work. Stay tuned until the end while I put everything on a bingo board to score when Chapter 5 comes out. And if you're watching this video near to when it was released, there's a good chance I'll be streaming for the first time on YouTube soon, or even right now. In preparation for Chapter 5's release, I'll be streaming Chapters 1 through 4, with each chapter's codebase open for us to dig through and chat about when interesting stuff comes up. And if the streams aren't a total disaster, I'll stream Chapter 5 on its launch too, using the save files we make during those streams. If the streams aren't live yet, you can check my channel's live page and hit notify for the upcoming streams to get alerted when they do go live. Otherwise, that tab should also hold the stream VODs if you want to see me make a fool of myself. There will be a special surprise at the end of Chapter 3 for the night fight, so make sure you don't miss it. To start with, let's get the obvious out of the way, the Dark World. We saw in the trailer that Gerson's and the Prophecy's portents were both spot on, and the community at large has seen this coming. The field of pink and gold is the Dark World for the Flower King, for the festival. Not the Flower King. Well, sort of the Flower King. I think it's tied to wherever Asgore sets up shop for the festival, not necessarily at the Flower King. The trailer gave us a few extra tidbits that have shaken up the predictions for me on this front, one of which is the prominent feature of this Shinto shrine with a curious white-colored quill pen, and of the Japanese-style architecture in the final shot. That ties in heavily to the weekly Famitsu art we got earlier this month. When I saw it, I just assumed that Japanese influence was because it was featured in a Japanese magazine. But with the added context of the trailer, I think it's more likely that it's a closer representation of the festival we'll see in-game than I originally thought. Now, the alternative to this is that it is a fully Flower King-centered Dark World, and that the Japanese influence comes from the comics that Alphys lent Asgore. She referred to her literature collection in Undertale as comics as well, and so did Undyne, so it's pretty likely to me that superhero comics are indeed manga and could influence an anime-themed sub-area of the Dark World. I lean towards the festival Dark World, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's Flower King as originally speculated. Next, let's look at a personal one of mine, our quest for the secret boss and/or the Shadowcrystal this time around. Toby Fox posted on Blue Sky about some of the translation notes for Chapter 5 earlier this year. The obvious one everyone focused on is the hintings of the Shadowcrystal lore. This drop came right on the heels of my friend's determination theory, and a lot of people rushed to that video's comment section when it dropped, which was a fun coincidence. But the lines I'm interested in are up here at the top right. Adventures, like quests. The formatting used for this with the number sign, hashtag, #, Octothorpe, is used in a few places I'm aware of. The most prominent one is the player is making a decision. And that's what I think the second line is, an option for a choicer where we tell Chris that they should pretend to be a dog. The second is in item and equipment descriptions, which neither fit. The last is in special UI circumstances, like in the standalone UI for shops. The third is where I think the first line fits in. Adventures and quests are both capitalized and seem to be referring to something specific, and it seems like it's the start of a fuller explanation of what adventures are, with the formatting indicating that it's a special UI circumstance. I think, like the S-rank boards were in Chapter 3 and the pianos were in Chapter 4, that a quest board, like you might see in a JRPG town, I'm thinking specifically of FF12's Hunt board, will be our signpost for finding our secret boss. This one's admittedly a bit of a stretch because it's paired with something that is definitely a player choice option, but I struggle to imagine a scenario where the valid answer to a situation could either be Chris, pretend to be a dog, or say the words adventures like quests. So to me, despite them being paired together, I think they're separate. Let's talk about a big one, the Roaring Night. My suspicions for this chapter, especially following Toby Fox saying, Chapter 5 is a fun chapter, let's have one more adventure like we did before. On his Blue Sky, and repeating a similar sentiment in the newsletter, I don't think the knight will feature very prominently in this chapter. In fact, if the knight does appear at all, I'm guessing it will only be as part of the ending of the chapter during the teaser/cliffhanger for Chapter 6. This chapter was originally meant to accompany the release of 3 and 4, and having all 3 chapters in a release feel focused on the Roaring Night would have been a lot. And I doubt the plan would be to have another chapter of the fun gang chasing the knight right after 4 concluded with another confrontation. I think the knight's going on the back burner until Chapter 6. So what are we getting this chapter? Going back to the original intention to include Chapter 5 with 3 and 4, both of the previous 2 chapters include a lot of references to Asgore's current living situation, and avoided giving us concrete details on what actually happened. I think we'll get some flashbacks, not unlike we did before Tenna's boss fight, regarding why exactly Asgore was removed from the police force. I have reasons to believe that why he was removed will be unexpected for most of you, especially if you haven't watched my mini-theory on the topic. In it, I go over why I think Asgore wasn't removed for messing up Dess's disappearance, but more likely for misusing or mishandling the shelter keys. I think this will be the big concrete answer we get out of Chapter 5, what Asgore did, and why it's caused so much distress for Chris every time they see a corkboard. That I think covers the big stuff I've got on the mind. Now I want to talk about the theory ideas I've put out, and what I would expect to see if those theories are actually correct. Part of a solid theory is that it needs to be testable, and these tests are going to be what determines if any of them are still on solid ground following 5's release. The second soul possession theory. In quick summary for those of you who have not watched, the second soul possession theory states that our possession of Chris was not the first soul possession to happen in Hometown, and that Chris has seen someone possessed by another soul rip it from their body, which is where they get the idea to chase Noelle around after pretending to rip their own heart out. The most important piece of evidence that could arise to help prove there was another soul possession would be information about Dess's disappearance, especially if there's any mention of Dess acting weirdly or not like herself beforehand. Dess was, in that video, the prime candidate for a second soul possessee for many reasons, so if she was acting weirdly before her disappearance, as Noelle has noted lately of Chris, that'd be a good sign that this theory is on the money. Double-crossed Carol from the Using Math video. This theory states that Chris was originally possessed by a different entity other than the player, an entity I referred to in the video as the Demon Soul, and that Carol had aligned herself with that entity specifically. It goes on to say the player's possession of Chris supplanted the Demon Soul and afforded Chris the ability to betray Carol without her knowledge. This theory primarily aimed to explain Carol's big red U, as it felt inconsistent to welcome the player back since we're working in opposition of Carol's plans, not to mention that we as the player can't actually return despite her welcome, plus Carol's insistence that only Susie be kept away from the guitar, not the player's soul, despite Chris very actively trying to keep us away. This one's hard to explain fully in a couple sentences, so if you're not fully following, check the video out. For this one to be true, I'd like to see some of Chris's activities immediately preceding Chapter 1. Maybe that's something to be held on to for a theoretical Chapter 0, but I have my doubts that any such prequel chapter will actually manifest despite that Chapter 0 art asset being present. Regardless, even hints that Chris's possession started before we, the player, arrive would go a long way towards solidifying this one. The connections theory. This theory centered around the idea that Chris's cell phone is the source of our ability to control them. The noise which plays when we call the phone in the dark world, same as the sound which plays from the shelter in the Holiday's basement, the sound of entry 17 is the sound of the active connection between Chris and the soul, mimicking the sound of a dial-up connection from the 90s and early 2000s, and serves as an explanation for that sound as well as why Chris's cell phone does not transform when they enter a dark world. Proof of this one would likely come from another source of the entry 17 sound, but that video made another bolder claim, and that is that the phone was the source of Chris's voice, explaining why Noelle finds it so strange sounding and why she describes it as sounding like it's coming from a speaker. I can see a scene playing out where Chris drops their phone for some reason and Susie asks them a question, prompting a choicer to appear for us, and when we select it, that telltale speech bubble pops up above Chris's phone, relaying the chosen text. Beyond that, more instances of Chris disagreeing with the soul's choices and attempting to override those choices could be opportunities for the soul's voice source to become clear. Friend's determination theory. This one's clear-cut. Friend is a creature who, like Flowey, has the power to manipulate our save file and controls the power of saving and loading, which in Undertale was referred to as determination. It seems like determination in Deltarune refers to a different ability being associated with the shadow crystals and the creation of dark fountains. But this theory was about Friend's ability to manipulate Undertale's definition of determination by changing the timeline. The evidence for this is Friend's appearance at 2 locations where Deltarune's saving behaves oddly, where things seem to change across saves and loads, as if someone in the vicinity is aware of the multiple attempts being made at a difficult challenge, the teacups in Queen's basement, and the fight against ERAM. Evidence for this theory is pretty straightforward: a 3rd location with a particularly difficult challenge, which gets easier or changes fundamentally on repeated attempts, where Friend is also present. Without something like this, or worse, another appearance of Friend at a mundane location, like in Chapter 4, this theory becomes a lot less likely. Alright, with the big ones out of the way, let's throw this all up on the bingo board and see where we're at. And now let's add a few that I think are obvious predictions a lot of people are making in the lead up to Chapter 5. And for some fun ones I've been thinking about, let's go down the list. I think we're going to open up the locked door in the Dreamer household that leads to Toriel's room. This one also comes from the translator notes, where it looks like we're going through a series of Dreamer family photos, similar to the ones on Noelle's PC for the Holiday family. I bet these are in an album in Toriel's bedroom, and we've had some reason to sneak in there for something. A party member other than the main 3 members of the Fun Gang. Noelle's return seems a lot more likely with her accompanying Susie and Chris in the new Chapter 5 screenshot in the Light World, but we could also see someone new, like Caddy, or Azrael returned from college, or a new character from the Dark World. The Toriel variable returns. One of the first things I'll be doing after I finish Chapter 5 will be digging into the code. So if there's any sign of the Toriel variable or anything similar, you'll hear about it from me. Special dialogue for the Thorn Ring on an aborted Weirdroot save. It's possible to get the Thorn Ring and carry it through the future chapters without snowgraving Birdly, and even if it doesn't result in us actually crafting the Twisted Sword, I bet we'll see some unique dialogue for doing so after we've acquired all of the Shadow Crystals. Book 3 about souls. I think we'll definitely see another soul book in the library at some point, considering we've already seen book 1, and skipping a book to go to 3, leaving a figurative hole where 2 should be, would be a very Entry 17 thing to do. And finally, a second Chris Dark Fountain. Maybe Chris creates the Chapter 5 fountain for some reason, or creates a new one for us to explore for Chapter 6, but a pet theory of mine relates to that past there, one of the fountains we've already closed, having been created by Chris. The Chapter 1 fountain going some way to explaining why the interests to both Dark Worlds are so similar, and why the Card Kingdom denizens fail to petrify as quickly as the native TV land ones do. The wait for Chapter 5 has felt long, but as you can maybe tell from the bingo board, it came a bit too quickly to run me dry on ideas for videos. Post Chapter 5, you can expect a lot from me. Anything new that hits my brain on the theory front based on what we've learned, I'll make a video on. Part 2 of the code video is in the works, but now it'll definitely heavily focus on what's discovered in Chapter 5. I doubt I'll be the first to find anything, but I will be dissecting it myself and sharing any fun bits I find along the way in the Discord server. In terms of breakdowns, like the stats video, an elemental resistance video is planned, and there are so many more niche mechanics in this game to look at that more videos in that style will certainly be coming, for Chapter 5 and for earlier chapters. It's coming in a few days. I cannot wait.